want to talk to you briefly about things in your diet which can potentially inflame your gut and also in some cases make a condition that you might have, for example endometriosis, a whole lot worse. So the main culprits here are sugar, alcohol, gluten, and potentially dairy as well. Let's take the first of these, so that's the sugars. We've already said why sugar is bad for you. But the other thing, or another reason why sugar should also be avoided, is that it can actually lead to quite a lot of inflammation. It can make the gut leakier, and that means that you start sapping and losing minerals and vitamins. So this is another really big reason why you should try and avoid it. But alcohol also contains sugar. So it can have exactly the same effect in terms of increasing inflammation around the body. But in addition to that, it also makes us store fat because that's what happens with sugar. It gets converted and stored into fat by increasing our insulin levels. The other thing about alcohol is that it actually also targets the liver. So the liver is the main organ that processes this alcohol. But if it's got too much alcohol on board, what happens is that the liver can't do its other normal job, which is processing and detoxing all of the other things that are happening within our bodies. So it's quite normal for the liver to process our hormones, for example. And if it's got alcohol that it needs to deal with, then it can't do the other functions that it should be. And that means that our hormones get affected and potentially stop us from being able to conceive. So another really good reason as to why alcohol should, generally speaking, be avoided. I've actually made a separate video all about alcohol and caffeine and why these two things are bad for you. So tune into that by clicking on the fertility health section and finding that video to get more information. Gluten is something that actually far more people have an insensitivity to than they realise. So it's not necessarily just people who suffer from celiac disease, but because gluten is an inflammatory agent, it can actually inflame the gut in people who may not realise that they're intolerant. The best way to be able to tell whether you are or not is to try and remove gluten from your diet and see if your mood levels and your energy levels improve and if you stop experiencing so much bloating, because these are all signs that gluten is possibly having this inflammatory effect on your gut. Dairy is a little bit controversial because dairy also contains good things like calcium and vitamin D, which we need in order to build healthy bones, but also in terms of supporting our hormone health. However, the trouble with dairy is that certain proteins within it can also act on the gut and act to inflame it and make it leaky, a little bit like gluten. So what I would say is if you have certain conditions where there's more generalized inflammation, like endometriosis, for example, try and avoid dairy or find alternatives to dairy. So this is where, for example, you'd be looking to get milk that's sourced from coconut or from cashew nuts or from rice, rather than bog standard cow's milk. And the same goes for women who might suffer from polycystic ovaries. But the reason here is that cows which are treated to produce milk often have hormones injected into them. And the problem is that these hormones get concentrated down the food chain and are found within our bodies when we ingest the milk. And these hormones can be particularly problematic in women who've already got hormonal imbalances. So with issues and conditions like polycystic ovaries, it's important that this is kept to a minimum. And again, I'd give you the same advice to try and avoid dairy products or seek alternatives where you can. But an important point to make here is because dairy does contain the good stuff like the vitamin D and calcium, it's important that if you are making that switch or if you are looking at alternatives, you make sure that you have enough of this in your diet too. And that might also involve taking supplements as well in order to help replenish those supplies. One final point I want to make is regarding the pill, the oral contraceptive pill. Now, lots of women will take the pill for contraceptive reasons. Sometimes they take the pill for medical reasons. But when they're trying to get pregnant and they come off it, what a lot of women don't realize is that the pill can affect the microflora of the gut, and it can also leave us quite depleted of certain minerals and vitamins. So again, it's important that if you have recently come off the pill and if your diet isn't the best while you're making these switches, that you look towards taking some additional supplements of vitamins, and in addition also take a probiotic that will help to balance out the gut flora and improve things in terms of how you digest your food.